Keisha, and this is Going to Him, where makeup meets the Messiah. If you're new here, welcome. On this page, I do my makeup while sharing what's been on my heart, always keeping it rooted in scripture. And if you're returning, hey friend, it's so good to see you again. I'm really glad you're here. So I just want to point out the obvious. I have a little friend, but let's ignore that, okay? So we're still in our glow focus, spending time walking with the wheat in the weeds parable. And I've been thinking a lot lately about timing. Not any kind of timing, God's timing. Because if I'm being honest, I don't always like it. I like control. I like knowing what's next. I like quick turnarounds and fast answers. And there's been a pattern in my life where I've moved ahead of God because I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to be still. I didn't want to look like I was stuck or unprepared or unsure. And listen, I have a long list of examples where I did things my own way. Signing up for things I didn't pray about, jumping into conversations or situations I wasn't supposed to be in, forcing relationships, making impulsive purchases because I didn't want to trust God with the how or the when. I called it faith, but really it was fear wearing a dress. And every time I rushed ahead, I paid for it. Financially, emotionally, spiritually. There were times I had to sit in the aftermath of my own decisions and admit, okay, Lord, this was me. I didn't wait on you. And that's humbling because the pressure to do something, especially when other people are expecting you to act or when your own flesh is getting loud, can make obedience feel like disobedience. It can make waiting feel like failure. But when I read the parable in Matthew 13 about the wheat and the weeds, it stopped me. There's this moment where the workers say, should we pull the weeds now? And the master says, no. If you do, you might uproot the wheat too. And I thought, how many times have I tried to pull something up too early and thinking I was fixing it, when really I was interfering with what God was growing? So this episode is called Overplucked because I've overdid it in the past. I was so focused on what looked messy or out of place that I didn't realize I was damaging what was still developing. And I think we do the same thing spiritually. We rush to remove what looks wrong without realizing that God is still doing something we can't see. We try to clean it up for ourselves before the harvest comes. But God says, wait, don't touch it yet. I know what I'm doing. So today we're going to talk about what it means to trust the timing of God when everything in you or around you is saying move now. We're going to talk about pressure, patience, and the beauty of divine delay. Because just because it's ugly doesn't mean it's not necessary. And just because people want you to pluck it doesn't mean God told you to touch it. All right, so let's head to Matthew 13. We're going back to verses 24 through 30. What I've realized is that this parable is very layered, so we're going to take our time this time. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. Now, let's just stop there. This man wasn't careless. He wasn't out here just throwing seeds recklessly. He sowed good seed, which means he was intentional. He was expecting a harvest. He had a vision. And that stood out to me because sometimes we assume that if we're in God's will, everything should stay clean, neat, and protected. But this parable reminds us that even in places where good seed is planted, where God is moving, where growth is still happening, the enemy still comes. I cannot believe I got this pimple on my forehead. Like, it's so big and the enemy just be boosy, bro. I cannot believe this pimple is so big. Okay. Verse 25 says, but while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. Now listen, so I don't think Jesus put that I don't think they were sleeping part in there on accident. Sometimes things creep in while we're not paying attention, while we're distracted, while we're spiritually tired, while we're resting. And let me be clear, it's not always your fault. This doesn't mean you failed. It just means the enemy is always looking for an open window. He didn't attack the wheat. He didn't kill the roots. He just planted something next to what was already growing. And that information was helpful because sometimes we think spiritual warfare is going to show up looking loud and obvious. But no, sometimes it comes looking similar, familiar, comfortable, harmless even. And by the time you notice it, it's been growing right beside your purpose, right next to your peace. And you're like, how did this even get here? That's exactly what happens next. The servants asked, where did these weeds come from? They were shocked, confused. And maybe you're there too. Maybe you're looking at your life like, God, I know I was doing what you told me to do. So why does it feel like everything around me is messy? And the master answers, an enemy did this. Not your friend, not your coworker, not your past, not even you, an enemy. And that's important to remember because sometimes we waste time blaming people or ourselves for things that are spiritual, for things that were planted in the dark with intent to distract you or discourage you. So the workers asked, do you want us to go and pull them up? And honestly, that's my instinct too. Like, let's fix it. Let's clean it up. Let's remove the problem now so it doesn't spread. And as I stated, there's been situations in my life where I've done that. I've jumped to fix something God hadn't called me to touch. I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like how uncomfortable it felt. I wanted to remove the tension now. But here's what the master says, no, because while you are pulling up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. And that truly blessed me because what if the thing I'm trying to remove isn't just affecting the issue, I'm actually damaging the good that's still developing underneath? What if the discomfort I'm trying to eliminate is tied to the very growth God is cultivating in me? He says, let both grow together until harvest. That's not negligence, that's intentionality. God is saying, yes, I see it. Yes, I know it's there, but leave it alone for now because I'm still growing something in you. And if you try to fix it before I say so, you might disrupt the very thing I'm working on. That's why this parable is so powerful. It's not just about props. It's about control. It's about learning to release the urge to fix everything right now and instead trust the one who sees the full harvest. It's about saying, God, even if it looks messy, I'll wait. Even if it makes me uncomfortable, I'll stay still. I don't want to damage what you're doing by moving ahead of you. So if you're in that season right now, and I believe I am definitely in that season right now where there's something growing in your life that doesn't feel good, something you want to pull, something you're asking God to just take away, pause. It doesn't mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean you failed. It might just mean it's not harvest time yet. And the safest hands to leave it in are his. If I'm being completely honest, I've never truly waited on God. Not in the way he's been calling me to, and that's hard to say out loud, but it's the truth. A few weeks ago, I was standing in line at the pharmacy, just doing something routine, and the Holy Spirit said to me, it felt so loud, I don't know why, like everything else felt mute, but the word sounds so loud to me. It says, you never wait and allow me to bless you. And it hit me hard. I just froze because I'm just standing in line trying to pick up my medicine. I'm like, am I not supposed to be getting my medicine? Like, do I not need the meds? Like, what are you telling me? I'm confused. I wasn't praying. I wasn't worshiping. I wasn't thinking about anything deep. But that one sentence exposed something I didn't want to admit. I don't wait well. I don't wait at all. I don't know why I'm laughing, but I don't wait at all. The truth is, I've always had this habit of trying to make things happen on my own. I move quickly, I plan, I react, and I usually convince myself that I'm being responsible or discerning, but really, I'm being impatient. I've had countless moments where I felt that quiet nudge not to buy something, not to send the text, and not to pursue the opportunity. And for a short while, I'll resist. I would obey for a moment, but then the pressure would come back, the thought would come back, the desire would start to grow again, and eventually I'll cave. And every time I've done that, there's been a cost. Emotional exhaustion or spiritual confusion. I always end up looking back and realizing God was trying to protect me. He was trying to grow something in me, but I rushed ahead. And I want to pause there and say, it's not that I didn't love God in those moments. I did. It's not that I wasn't praying. I was. But waiting requires more than love. Waiting requires more than trust. I've come to realize that trust doesn't always show up in the big, bold gestures. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to move, choosing not to act, choosing to sit in tension and say, Lord, I'll stay here until you speak. And honestly, I haven't always done that. Sometimes I've filled the silence with my own decisions. Sometimes I've taken God's quiet as a cue to move when really it was invitation to lean deeper into Him. What I'm learning is that the harvest doesn't come when we trust God enough to let Him bring it in His time, but that requires surrender. It requires silence. It requires staying in uncomfortable places longer than we want to. And that's the part I struggle with. I don't like the unknown. I don't like stillness. But God keeps reminding me the delay is not punishment, it's preparation. There have been times I've cried out and asked God, why haven't you moved yet? But if I'm being truthful, the deeper question was, why haven't I let you lead? And sometimes we don't realize how much control we're still holding until He confronts us with it gently, not out of anger, but out of love. I've asked God why I haven't received certain things I've prayed for. And deep down, I know the answer, because I haven't waited, because I haven't allowed Him to fully lead, because I still try to bless myself instead of letting Him do it. And I don't say that with shame. I say it with hope, because if He's still speaking to me about it, that means He's still working with me on it. He hasn't given up. He's teaching me how to wait, even now. Doing liners and talking is so hard. Maybe you've never given God enough space to actually bless you in His time. Maybe you've jumped ahead, made plans, and said yes too fast, settled too soon. But the beauty of God's timing is that it's never too late to surrender. You don't have to be perfect at waiting. You just have to be willing to learn. There's grace for impatience. There's mercy for every moment we ran ahead. And God is still committed to growing us into people who can wait well, because the kind of fruit He produces in our lives can't be rushed. He's not trying to withhold anything from us. He's trying to make sure we're ready when it comes. So if we're asking the question, why hasn't God moved yet? The honest answer is sometimes He actually won't. Especially when we've always been taught that God's delays is setting us up for something better. Like we're expecting Him to move because that's all they typically show us. Sometimes the delay is preparation. Sometimes God is saying not yet, because I'm still maturing you, or not yet because the timing isn't safe. But sometimes the delay isn't a delay, it's a denial. It's God saying, no, not this, not now, not never. And I know that sounds heavy, but the more I grow in my faith, the more I realize even God's no is rooted in love. I made this playlist on my phone, and the cover art is a picture of Jesus kneeling in front of this little girl. She's holding a small teddy bear behind her back, and Jesus is asking for the small teddy bear. But what she doesn't see is that Jesus is holding a much bigger teddy bear behind his back. She's saying, but it's all I got. And he's saying, just trust me. That image speaks so deeply to where I am. Like, I'm clinging to what feels like everything, whether it's a dream, a relationship, an opportunity, or even just the way I imagined my life would go. And I think if I let go of this, I'll have nothing left. But what I don't always see is what God is holding behind his back, what he's preparing that I can't comprehend yet. I'm getting excited because there's something happened recently to me and it just came out of nowhere. But God had already knew, of course, that was going to happen, and he already had things together. And so when everything fell apart, it was like right there. It was right, like it was already coming. And I was just like, like, I'm getting excited. Okay, what he's preparing that I can't comprehend yet. And sometimes what he's preparing isn't a better version of the same thing. It's a completely different thing, a different calling, a different kind of healing, a different direction altogether. That's what makes surrender hard, because it's not a trade. It's trust. God doesn't always give us the thing we ask for. He doesn't owe us a replacement that fits our expectations, but he is always faithful to give us what is good, what is right, what will draw us closer to him. And that is where the peace is. I've been praying about this episode, and I'll be honest, I didn't come into it with much clarity as I usually do. I didn't have a long list of verses or a big revelation, and maybe that's the point. Maybe sometimes what we bring to God isn't our finished idea, but our willingness to show up and keep trusting him, even when the message feels incomplete. So here's what I know. God's timing is not random, whether he's saying not yet, or not this, or even just wait. He's still working with a purpose. And even if I don't fully understand the reason, I can still choose to believe in the character of the one who does. Now, let me go back to something from earlier, because I feel like it needs to be said again, maybe even louder this time. God doesn't always give us the thing we ask for, and he doesn't owe us a replacement that fits our expectations. I need to go on a tangent for a second, but stay with me, because this part is heavy. I think it needs to be said, and that's not just a hard truth, it's a holy one. We forget who we're talking to sometimes. We treat God like an ATM, like a backup plan, like a resource that's supposed to respond to our demands. But God is not a sugar daddy. He's not our vending machine. He's not a genie or a divine customer service rep who exists to take our orders and fulfill our personal vision boards. And if you think God has to do what you say, you need to humble yourself. Like, respectfully, I'm being like, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying, please check yourself, because he's still God and he's still holy. And I'll be honest, I've had to check myself, because there are things that I prayed for that didn't happen. And if I'm honest, I felt entitled. I felt like, God, I prayed, I fasted, I asked you, where is it? And God had to remind me, I'm not obligated to do what you want. I am committed to doing what is good. You're not at Burger King. You can't always have it your way. Do they still even say that? I'm born in the early 90s, so they used to say that. This is not about preference. This is about purpose. I think about how a good parent doesn't give their child everything they ask for. I don't have kids yet, but I think about my nieces. I have two. There have been so many times when one of my nieces, she's asked for something, candy, soda, more screen time. She loves that iPad. And the answer was no. Not because I don't love her, because I do, but because I know what's best for her body. Because I can see the bigger picture she can't see. Sometimes the child, oh wow, this is not very, oh, this may have just messed up my whole look. Did this just mess up my whole look? Okay, let me keep going and see. I think I just messed up my whole look. Sometimes the child is crying and doesn't understand why the answer is no, but the adult does. The adult knows bedtime is coming. The adult knows sugar will make them crash. The adult knows they'll wake up in the middle of the night and won't feel well. So the answer is no. And that's love. I even think about kids who pee in the bed and they ask, Mom, can I have some juice? And the answer is no. Why? Because the parent knows what's coming later. That little moment of pleasure will bring discomfort later. And God does the same thing. You might think it's just juice, but God sees the midnight consequence. Sometimes he withholds because he sees what it would do to us, not just physically, but spiritually. He sees how we would cling to the gift instead of the giver. He sees how it would puff us up or distract us or pull us into compromise. And in his mercy, he says no. And that's the hard part. He doesn't always explain why. And he doesn't have to. I know my mama didn't explain every single thing to me, but as I've grown older, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I understand why my mom told me no. That's where reverence comes in. We're not dealing with an average person. This is the King of Kings, the creator of everything. And we're not entitled to a yes just because we feel ready. I really do feel like I'm talking to myself. I really feel like I'm talking to myself right now because God's been calling me into a deeper reverence. I say I trust him, but sometimes I only trust him if I understand him. That's not trust, that's control. Reverence says, even if you say no, I'll still worship you. Reverence says, even if I don't get what I want, I'll still surrender. I believe some of us are waiting on God to give us something that he never promised because we haven't accepted that no can be holy too. So if this season feels like a loss or an unanswered prayer or like a delay, I want to gently ask you, have you made peace with the possibility that God's no is actually his mercy? And do you trust him anyway? I ran upstairs to grab a pigment. I think I may be able to fix this. So I wanted to bring us back to where we started, the wheat in the weeds parable. The thing that struck me the most when I read the parable isn't just that the enemy planted weeds, it's that God allowed them to stay. He didn't panic. He didn't rush. He said, let them grow together until the harvest. That takes restraint. That takes vision. That takes confidence in the process. And I think that's the kind of confidence God wants us to develop, not in ourselves, but in him. Not in the clarity of the situation, but in the character of the sower. He knew what he planted. He knew what was real and what was fake. He didn't need to react to what the enemy did because he was already in control of the outcome. And if you're in a season right now where you're staring at a field full of tension, where you see the wheat, but you also see the weeds, I want to encourage you with this. God is not overwhelmed. He's not confused. He's not uncertain. He's not late. He's letting things grow, not because he doesn't care, but because he's cultivating a harvest that's deeper than you realize. Sometimes we think obedience looks like fixing everything quickly, but in this parable, obedience looks like restraint. Don't pull it, don't force it, don't try to protect the wheat by acting without God's instruction. Your job is to stay faithful in the field. Water what God gave you, tend to it. Wait for His signal, because when harvest time comes, He will do the separating. He will do the removing. He will handle what needs to be dealt with. And in the meantime, your growth doesn't stop just because there's something growing beside it. The weeds may be visible, but the wheat still has a purpose. The wheat is still His, and when the time is right, He will gather the wheat into His barn. I really feel like I was talking to myself today. Like I'm just in the mirror telling myself, but that's all I have for today. I do hope it was good. It was definitely good for me. So this is the look today. I'm not that happy with it. I had this look in mind, and I don't know if this is what I was going for. But if this spoke to you, I'd love for you to leave a comment, subscribe, or share it with someone who might need a reminder to be patient. God is in control. Thank you so much for spending time with me. As usual, I do have to finish getting dressed. Hopefully I see you next week for the next Glow Focus. Oh no, hopefully I see you next week for Bible studies. It won't be a devotional next Sunday. I'll have a Bible study on next Wednesday. Yeah, but anyways, until next time, stay blended and stay blessed.
Love like a mountain that cannot be